Hello, everyone. Let's begin by going back in time and taking a look at the first age of full-stack React. The journey begins in 2013, the year in which React did not even exist. That is, until May 29th, 2013, when React was first announced at JSConf US. This means that next month, React will be turning 8 years old. Doesn't that sound crazy? To me, React seems so much older than 8 years old, but it's only 8 years ago. Now, we look back on this as a very significant event. I mean, our careers are built around React. But at the time, React was not so well received. It had a lot of haters and skeptics, and people were especially upset at JSX. In fact, there were entire code bases like the Mozilla DevTools, Firefox DevTools, that were written. It was an entire React app written without JSX. So it was using like create element and so forth. So we've come a long ways, to say the least. Now, there are two sort of breakthroughs, I'll call them that, in my mind, that React brought. One is it made it easier to build and maintain complex user interfaces. And it provided a new way to think about and build UIs that was totally new to anything that came before. And another really nice invention here was the declarative component model. And so you no longer had to use jQuery to surgically update the DOM and all the places that it needed to change. So let's jump forward a couple years to 2015. Now, one significant event in this year was that React released ES6 class support. So prior to this time, you were using react.createClass to create all your components. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go Google react.createClass and check out some code snippets, and it looks pretty funny. Totally different than what we're used to today. And there's these things called mix-ins and all kinds of wild stuff So this was a big deal. And of course, we've kind of moved beyond that by now, but this was a big deal in 2015. Now, there's one other thing that was very significant in 2015. That was the introduction of GraphQL by Facebook. Now, this is at a time where the single page application is just really getting going. And so now you have separate backends and separate front ends, and teams are getting larger. And this API layer is becoming a very crucial piece of the infrastructure of your application. And of course, people are running into limitations with REST APIs. And so GraphQL was an answer to that. It was bringing focus to this important piece and seeking to optimize it and making better and make developers more productive. So, very nice. Let's go on to the next year, 2016. This was a big year because two very important things were released this year: Create React App and Next.js, within mere months of each other. Isn't that crazy? It seems like, looking back, it seems like one came before the other, but they were both released around the same time. But they were focused on two different things, right? So Create React App was really focused on the static single page application, but Next.js was optimized for server-side rendering, and it didn't have any static optimization or any static pages, as long as my memory is correct. But this was very important because it brought a couple breakthroughs. Number one is it abstracted away the Webpack config for you. No longer did you have to create your own Webpack config from scratch or use a boilerplate where you had this massive Webpack config inside your project that was like scary to look at, right? And additionally, Next.js abstracted away the routing and the per page bundling. So this was a big deal for developer productivity. No longer did you have to set up the router and figure out which router to use and things like that. Now, there was one more thing that happened in 2016 that I think that's very worth mentioning in this context of building full stack applications. And that is the introduction of GraphQL backend as a service platforms. GraphQL being one of the prominent ones that was created by the company that is now Prisma. And then also in 2018, it's jumping forward a couple of years, but in the same category is Hasura. And this was around the same time that GraphQL was being shut down. Hasura started up. And so both of these are GraphQL backend as a service providers. And the breakthrough that they brought is it made it really easy to spin up a backend database and a GraphQL API. Now remember, this is especially for when GraphQL was released in 2016, GraphQL was only a year old. And so still early and still figuring out how to do all these sort of things. But they gave a real boost to initial productivity. But the downside is that you're tied to a third-party service. Even if you self-host it, you're kind of handcuffed to that implementation. And it's very hard to customize or change the resolvers of the implementation. But there's an idea here that is really powerful. And that is the ability to get your backend up quickly without having to know a lot about how to do that. All right, let's move on to 2019. At the beginning of 2019, React hooks were officially released in a React stable version. So this was a big year. This was when, well, many people had already been rushing into hooks in the alpha versions, but this is when the safe folks could say like, yes, now it's production ready. Let's start using hooks. And this really changed the way we write React apps. So today, 2 years later, hooks are very much a key part of almost all of our daily workflows. The second thing in 2019 that was very significant was the introduction of API routes to Next.js. Before this, Next.js only did pages. But in 2019, around June, they added API routes. This is very significant in the context of building full stack React apps, because now for the first time ever, you could have one single server that would serve your React components and your API routes in a really nice integrated package. And it was in this fall at React Rally Conference that I remember hearing about someone they were now using Next.js for all of their applications. And it was sort of like in a progressive idea, but I was like, wow, like there's something to this. And there were people who saw that early on that Next.js was going to be kind of key to building full stack apps. So now we come to 2020. And at the beginning of 2020, the outlook for full stack React developers was very bleak. It's 7 years after React was released, and we still don't have anything remotely comparable to Rails or Laravel. And when starting a new project, you have a million decisions to make. But even with all the choices, there's none that seem truly great. And partly because they're hard to make all work together. And there's a portion of React developers that are abandoning React altogether and going back to traditional Ruby on Rails apps with server-side rendering, because they're faster at that because of the complexity of React apps and the API layer and getting everything to work right. But then comes February 17th, 2020, and an unknown fellow by the name of Brandon Bear announces a revolutionary new full-stack framework for React called Blitz.js. React developers all around the world got super excited because finally there would be a solution to their full-stack blues. And Blitz brought a number of breakthroughs. Number one, just the fact that there was now a batteries included framework like Rails or Laravel for React. This was awesome. It was super exciting. And secondly, Blitz brought a zero API data layer that abstracts away the API into a compile step. And this returned us to a developer experience similar to that of the traditional server-side rendered Rails approach. Because with the traditional Rails workflow, there's no API. And so it's very simple and fast to develop because you don't have that extra piece of architecture in your app. And so that's what Blitz brings to React. It brings that same super fast developer experience to React apps because you don't have to mess or think about REST or GraphQL. It just abstracts the whole thing away. And so this is a massive boost to productivity. Also, Blitz is built on top of Next.js, the very well-loved framework at this point that is a hybrid framework, and you can do so many things with it, but it's still pretty minimal in what it gives you out of the box. And so by doing this, Blitz effectively creates a custom distribution of Next.js, similar to like a Linux distribution. But surprise, just 1 month later, on March 20th, there's another huge announcement about RedwoodJS, yet another full stack framework for React. And so Redwood is seeking to solve the same problems as Blitz, but it takes a totally different approach. Instead of abstracting the API away like Blitz does, Redwood keeps it and seeks to optimize it with a GraphQL layer and really nice integration between the front end and the back end. And the breakthroughs in my mind for Redwood is that it gives you a developer experience similar to that of GraphQL or Hasura, but where you have the ability to customize the code because you have ownership over the stack. There's no dependency on a third-party service. And so this is really, I believe it's like a refined version of that idea of GraphQL and Hasura, but in a much better package in a framework at this abstraction level. And secondly, Redwood brings a monolithic developer experience similar to Blitz, but with Redwood, it's an optional monolithic deployment. So you can deploy them together as a monolith, or you can deploy them totally separate places if you so desire. And so just like that, all within about a month's time, all of a sudden we are launched into a new era for full stack React. This was a very exciting time. So let's take a step back and look at Blitz and Redwood both and look at what are the commonalities and try to understand where we're going with full stack React. Number one, both of these are full stack JavaScript and TypeScript. And so no longer do you have a separate language on your server versus your front end. And this is a very big point for me personally and many others I know as well, that you get slowed down so much by having, say, Ruby on the back end and then JavaScript on the front end. And then additionally, you have the typing issue. So when you have full stack TypeScript, you can share code and types end-to-end and get end-to-end type safety. This is incredible. And it's hard, like the benefit that it brings you to your productivity and debugging and all of that is hard to overstate. Secondly, both of these are batteries included frameworks like Rails and Laravel. And so this is awesome. We've had similar things in the JavaScript world, but not for React. Most of them are server-side rendered, and so it's still full stack JavaScript, but it wasn't a batteries included framework with React. And so that's what Blitz and Redwood bring to the table. Thirdly, they both provide a monolithic developer experience. And so this allows you to just develop your app as all as one cohesive thing, and it's much simpler to think about. Number 4, both are opinionated to various degrees. And this is really nice because it gives you a set of default conventions, configurations, patterns and ideas. It's just like, hey, you should do it this way. And so if you don't know what to do, then, follow that opinion. Of course, you can change and you can go against the opinions. Fairly easy for both of these, but it gives you a nice starting point. And lastly, both of these seek to optimize full stack productivity. Most things until now have focused on optimizing either the front end or just the back end, but not both together. And this is a really hard problem to solve, but it's a problem worth solving. So, what do we look forward to? What do I think is coming for full stack React? Number 1 is that it's going to continue to be easier than ever for front-end developers to do full stack. There are many more front-end developers than back-end developers. And so it only makes sense to make back-end development easier for front-end developers and do it and provide a really nice developer experience, and then everyone benefits. So this is definitely going to be an area of focus for Blitz and Redwood in the coming years. Secondly, is we're going to continue to see increase in productivity for full stack development. And this is very significant for solo developers who are just doing side projects, solo developers who are building a business from scratch. This is very key. And then also small teams who are on a budget and trying to work together, and it allows you to get more done with less people. So this is certainly going to be an area of focus as well. Next is more backend architecture and patterns. Blitz and Redwood are both very minimal right now when it comes to the backend. We don't provide many APIs or recommendations. It's pretty kind of leaves a lot to the reader to figure out, or the coder in this case. But we absolutely want to make this better, and we're going to get there. So there's the things that you need on the back end are things like background processing, scheduled jobs, queues, emails, file uploads, these sort of things. And so Blitz is going to be focusing on this, on adding recommendations, libraries, APIs for these things. For example, like Nest, if you know about Nest.js, it's a very heavy backend framework. And so we're looking at Nest and seeing what patterns that we can bring to Blitz to make all of this even easier than it is now. Number 4 is serverless. Now, while both Blitz and Redwood support serverless deployments out of the box today, serverless full stack apps are still the Wild West. There are dragons, beware. But I believe that over the coming years, we're going to see massive developer experience improvements for full stack serverless applications. And it won't be just for really nice serverless deployments, but also serverless databases, serverless background processing and queues, and a nice integration of all these things together. And so it's still the dream for many people to have this serverless workflow where you don't have servers to manage, where it's auto scaling, it scales to 0. And so it's very cheap if you don't have very much traffic. So this is definitely an area to keep an eye on. And I'm very excited to see what comes down the pipe. Lastly is mobile app integration into the full stack developer experience. Currently, Blitz and Redwood are mostly focused on the full stack web experience, but increasingly mobile apps are a very common thing. And so we want to bring those into this full stack developer experience. So you get, so like what good is it, right? If you have a nice full stack web experience, but then your mobile app experience is just like kind of left to its own. Like let's bring that into this entire full stack thing, and then it's even easier for everyone, right? Like it just makes sense. So Blitz is going to be adding first-class React Native support. And so what we want to do is bring the zero API experience to React Native apps. And so you don't have to mess with REST or GraphQL. You'll just import your Blitz server functions into your React Native code, and then it would be compiled away, same as that is now, into an API call. So this is something that will be very exciting to come, hopefully sometime later this year. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention. If you would like to keep up with what I'm working on, you can follow me at Flybear on Twitter. And if you're interested in learning more about Blitz.js, go to Blitz.js.com, and documentation is there. It's very easy to get started. Additionally, on the homepage there, the first video there is, I think it's like an hour-long video that goes into all the key areas of Blitz, the key features, and shows you like how productive it can make you. So definitely check that out. And last but not least, if you want free stickers, free Blitz.js stickers, go to blitzjs.com/stickers, enter your name and address, and we will send you free Blitz stickers. They're really cool. So check that out. Again, thank you.